if this is still right. You think this is still right? Okay. This might just be an overlook.
Stuff that's grown up.
Yeah. Actually, so let's start off with that question, and we'll get to all the other things. But what made you decide to climb the Great Arch?
Are we ready to go?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, the Great Arch. My climbing buddy Hugh Mills and I had heard that there was a climb up at Stone Mountain State Park. We had never been there. We'd never seen it. So one day we headed up there to check it out, and there was nobody around. It was wintertime, and sure enough, there it was. It was easy to recognize this climb that people now call the Great Arch. It's a big open book. Very dramatic. So when we got there, it was snowing. So
what year was this?
This was in the early 70s. I don't remember exactly what year it was, maybe the early 70s. And we went up the well-known first pitch and then across this wooded ledge and then started up the actual arch crack itself. But as we got along, the climb got harder, the crack got smaller. We were using kind of a layback technique. So we got on up, it started to get dark. My friend Hugh started out on what we hoped would be the last pitch, and at some point I noticed that there was not a lot of rope left, and so I started yelling at Hugh, "Hugh, 15 feet left, Hugh, 10 feet left." He couldn't hear me, it was very windy, and I was afraid he was going to get stuck in a delicate spot. So at one point I saw there was about 3 feet of rope left, and so in those days we used a waist belay. I just took the rope out from around my waist and held it in my hand, and he got there. So that was good enough, and I was able to follow up as the darkness fell. Very exciting.
And nowadays everyone seems to have a headlamp when they climb. But what would you guys do back then for a headlamp?
I'm not sure we even knew they existed. We certainly didn't use them.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, so you're there, you're doing the arch. What kind of gear is hanging off your waist that day?
At that time, the standard technology for protection was pitons, or using nylon slings to put over a horn of rock or thread through a hole in the rock, or around a tree, because here on these North Carolina crags, there were frequently trees that could be belay anchors. So anyway, so we use slings around rock knobs, trees, and pitons. And so I've got a few pitons here.
Yeah, let's see them.
That are the kind we use. These are made by Chouinard equipment. And the kinds that were most useful are these angle pitons. They come in different sizes. This is probably 1 inch, 3/4 of an inch. Here's one that's really small. So of course,
now people have heard of pitons. Most everyone's heard of them, but I'm sure most climbers nowadays have never ever seen one unless it's in a museum. But how did they work?
Well, you would look for a crack you would look for a solid crack where the rock was strong on each side of the crack. And then you would pick a piton that would go about halfway into the crack like that. So, you wanted it to fit in about that far. Then you would take your piton hammer, which is a very solid, fairly heavy implement, and pound away until it went in, hopefully about at least that far.
Oh, okay. Got it. Nice.
So once you got this hammer, if you selected a proper crack and pounded it in this far, that's a very solid anchor. So then you would clip a carabiner to it and maybe a sling to keep the rope from being, around too many sharp angles and so forth.
So, like, how many of those would you carry? Like, how many of those do you think you had with you that day?
Well, these short climbs, that were climbs around on the crags here would be 2 to 4 pitches, and so we would usually take maybe 4 or 5 pitons.
Yeah. Is there anything that's? I was really fascinated by this one, just because these look manufactured, but this looks hand hammered. Can you tell me about that one?
Yeah, I don't even know how I got these. Someone must have given them to me, but yeah, this is the one you're pointing out. It looks like it was hand forged. It's a kind of like a Lost Era piton, but a little bit different design. And these others, these are some angle pitons that have a ring attached for your carabiner to hook to. And these, I think, are the old soft iron pitons. The Chouinard pitons were made from hard steel, and so they didn't distort or bend. They would last a long time. These are the old soft iron.
Oh, I see that. Yeah, it's totally. You can see some of it's bent out of shape somewhat.
Yeah. And these are some other soft iron ones. This is made by Cassin, which I think is an Italian company. Let's see.
And back then you would buy things like this, like here in Chapel Hill, there were stores that sold this?
I got them all by mail order. This is an article that appeared in Summit magazine, which was, I suppose, the primary climbing magazine. I think it was run by two spinster ladies up in New England. And, all people who were interested in climbing would read it religiously. It came out once a month. So after Hugh and I had done this climb in the early 70s, we found this October 1964 issue. Then we got over to the part about Stone Mountain State Park, and the author described an attempt to climb the Great Arch, and he described going up the first pitch across the ledge. And then he said, after going to about 200 feet, we felt we had reached the limits of free climbing, and we retreated. So Hugh and I said, "My God, we did it!"
Yep.
Yeah, this is the famous Chouinard catalog. I think from the early '70s. Has this beautiful Japanese design on the front, and what it's most famous for is a long article by Doug Robinson. I'll get over to it here just in a second. This article by Doug Robinson, called "The Whole Natural Art of Protection," is a kind of missionary piece advocating what they call clean climbing, that is, using nuts and chocks and not pounding pitons into the rock. Of course, that can be a real problem if you have areas that are heavily used by climbers and where the same crack is getting pitons pounded in it day after day. So, and it has a lot of good illustrations about how to rig up protection with various kinds of nuts. Here's where you can use two nuts in opposition to get a good, or vertically in opposition to get a good protection. So this was a combination of training manual, missionary work, and also a product catalog. And so you can see here, Chouinard is selling their rope and webbing, ice axes, And over here they've got their crampons, and then their pitons over here. Here's their piton hammer, and again here it mixes in some safety tips about how to place a piton correctly and incorrectly. And then you turn over and there they are for sale. The tiny little whoops. Then knife blades and bugaboos. Then the famous lost arrow piton. And then over here the angle pitons. These were probably the most useful on the kind of rock that we climbed on in North Carolina. It's kind of a triangular thing here with the 2 points down below and one above, and if you got that in the right crack, it was super solid. This was the piton hammer that we used. Again, these would be used to pound the piton in, and to get them out, you would use the hammer end and pound the piton back and forth, one direction, then the other direction, and after maybe 10 or 20 good blows, it would work its way out and you could pull it out. This more pointed end was maybe to knock off a little piece of rock that was in the way of your piton placement. That would be not considered to be politically correct these days. But mainly this was the business end right here. And here's a picture of a climber festooned with various kinds of, like a very big collection of chalks. So anyway, this was a revolution in climbing, this advocacy for clean climbing. Well, my climbing mentor, Hugh, I remember one day we went up to Moore's Wall and he said, "John, I hear that climbers are beginning to use different kind of protection, nuts or chalks. And maybe there's something to that. We'll have to test them out. We know that pitons work, but we need to make sure that this new technology actually works." And so we got some chalks and we started experimenting with them. And there were some designs then that don't exist anymore. This was one of our favorites. I think this was made by a company called SMC. I'm not sure if it exists anymore. And you see it can be used in 2 dimensions. You can use it that way or you can turn it sideways and use it in a narrower crack. And so we experimented with these and we found that if you place them carefully, you could really get a terrific anchor. And so that began to build our confidence. This was another kind of this was called a peck cracker. And so this was just made by a different company. It has a kind of knurled surface on it here. That was also good.
So did you make the transition right away? Well, I mean, over a course of like a year, and then you're like,
I would say
okay,
it was pretty fast.
And then you were just done with pitons.
Right.
Wow. Climbed. When do you think you went out of climbing?
Probably about at the end of the 70s.
Like, what did it do for you to be able to climb?
It was wonderful to have these places that we could climb, particularly Moore's Wall, which is part of a state park, Stone Mountain, and Linville Gorge, which is a fabulous place for climbing. And I guess this was sort of the early days of climbing still in North Carolina. And so it had a tremendous, I really loved the challenge of it, being outdoors, the exertion, and particularly my fellowship with the other climbers that I went with. So it was a huge experience for me, and I still treasure those memories. This is the famous book put out by the Seattle Mountaineers called Mountaineering the Freedom of the Hills. And so this is the second edition, which came out in 1967. So when I got interested in both in rock climbing, which I got interested in, and also going out west to explore the Rockies and the Cascades. This was the Bible, basic instruction on rock climbing, knots, protection. So Charlie, this shows you how primitive belaying was back in the late 60s and early 70s. The climber would just tie in around his waist, and then here he's protecting the lead climber just by running the rope around his waist and holding it on the other side. That was state of the art. Of course, now people would say, can't do it. And as far as I can tell, there's no mention in this 1967 book of anything like nuts or chocks or much less cams. That was yet to be invented. It has lots of good information about snow and ice climbing. Pretty much everything you need you could find in this book by the Seattle Mountaineers. Well, this is the first climbing guide I got. It's called A Climber's Guide to the Carolinas by A. Williams. You can tell it's a very primitive publication. It was a typewritten script that's been shrunk to fit on these small pages, and so the print is so small it's really hard to make out. But anyway, and it's not dated, so this is a very kind of a first shot that someone made, but it's helpful. And so then this one came out, Carolina Climber's Guide by Buddy Price. That's another famous early climbing name. And this one is dated 1977.
So the Yosemite decimal system back then generally went up to what? What was considered a hard climb?
The changing perspective, and things that used to seem hard now seem easier. But I guess we would occasionally do pitches that were maybe up to 5'8". One of the other early climbing opportunities I want to mention is a quarry over in Durham. And according to the story, it was where rock had been quarried to build some of the buildings at Duke University.
If I try to go climbing and find that quarry today, what's there?
Well, what you would be quite surprised, because this quarry is now incorporated into the grounds of the Museum of Life and Sciences in Durham, and you would find that their bears are living in it now. So you would be climbing along with their collection of bears.
Be climbing quickly.
Yes. And my friend Hugh actually wrote a guidebook to it, which I have, and I can show you a copy of that. And so there are quite a few climbs that are described there. So this was the hardest climb in the quarry, the White Stripe. This is one of the best parts of the quarry climb. The place that we climbed the most was Moore's Wall, which is at Hanging Rock State Park. And there's a wonderful long cliff there that faces away from the inside of the park, so it's fairly secluded. And the thing that's nice about Moore's Wall is that there are many variants. You know, you can have, there was one big formation called the Sentinel right in the middle of it. And there was usually kind of a standard first pitch, but then you could take maybe 3 or 4 different pitches on up from there up to the top. So it had an element of exploration to it.
You know, one thing that occurs to me is, you know, nowadays the struggle is for access. People are worried about cliffs being closed. There's a lot of private ownership issues or development issues. What was access like back then? Like, could people just, like, could you kind of just climb anywhere?
There was one interesting issue that occurred with the state parks up at Stone Mountain, again, which is a wonderful place for climbing. Some of the people at state parks weren't sure whether that was an appropriate use of the parks. And so we, at one point, several climbers and the superintendent of state parks had a big expedition up to Stone Mountain State Park and talked about, you know, is climbing damaging to the resource? Is it inappropriate? And one of the park planners said, well, you know, I'm not sure that visitors want to look up at this rock and see somebody climbing it. You know, for some people there was a kind of aesthetic issue. There's another state park where there was another significant issue, Pilot Mountain. Pilot Mountain is a wonderful knob that sticks up near Highway 52, you know, up north of Winston-Salem. It's again a state park, and there's some wonderful climbing there, but the problem is that there is a trail around the knob at the bottom, right below the cliffs. And so the parks decided that there was too much danger of hikers being injured by falling rocks or dropped equipment, and so they did ban that.
Did you ever get to climb there before it closed?
Oh yes.
You got to climb on there?
Oh yeah. So there were some wonderful climbs there, and one of the treats was that up on top was a fabulous blueberry patch.
What?
And so at the right time of year, you could do a nice climb and get a nice harvest of blueberries to take down with you, or to eat on the spot. Yeah, this is my first and only ice axe. I got very interested in climbing out in the Rockies and the Cascades. And so this was an ice axe that was developed by Mountain Safety Research, which was a company started by a guy named Larry Penberthy, who was an engineer and kind of an independent thinker, and maybe not one who always played well with others. So when Larry Penberthy, he got going on climbing, and he decided that the ice axes, the European ice axes that Jim Whitaker and REI were selling, had the wrong pick angle. They were more straight than this, and they didn't have this sharp point here that sort of curves down. And so according to Penberthy, if you tried to self-arrest with one of the REI axes, they would tend to skate along the hard snow or ice and not do the job they were supposed to do. And so anyway, Larry Penberthy started his own company, and they made these and some other products. And so he put out a newsletter, and in that newsletter he criticized the ice axes that were being sold by REI. Then here is maybe his first MSR ice axe. So here Penberthy tested various European ice axes, and these are the kinds that were sold by REI, you know, the Gravel, Simond, etc. And he you know, some of them had the wooden handles broke. That was one thing he criticized. So this started a huge battle between him and Jim Whitaker, you know, who felt highly outraged that this local engineer was challenging his expertise and his equipment. But eventually, apparently, they made peace, and I think at one point, REI may have bought Mountain Safety Research. I'm not absolutely sure about that, but anyway, peace was made. I remember when we climbed Mount Rainier, we knew that the waist tie that we were using for rock climbing would not do it. And so we knew we needed a harness in case we fell into a crevasse. And so Larry Penberthy sold a kit for making a chest and leg harness out of automobile seatbelt webbing. And so you bought the kit, you had this long roll of seatbelt webbing and his instructions on how to tie knots and piece it together. Okay, these are crampons for snow and ice climbing, and I think these date to the early 70s too. So they're made by Soleva, which I think is an Austrian, West German company.
They're still going, yep.
So, you know, these have the front points, which are good for very steep terrain, and these are the kind that are hinged so that they can fit on boots that have a little bit of flex to them. So these are really good just for basically glacier climbing, not for ice climbing.
And those are leather straps.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And so
that's awesome.
So yeah, they're just very functional, and they're just perfect for snow and glacier climbing.
You're on.
Okay, so this is the first climbing rope I got back in probably maybe the late 60s or early 70s. And so this is it's called a laid rope. That is, it's several strands twisted together, sometimes called a laid rope. And it's nylon, so it has the strength and the elasticity of a regular climbing rope. And it was made by a company called Gold Line. So these are called Gold Line ropes. And this is a 3/8 inch. And so this was thought to be suitable for top roping, glacier travel, or rappelling. And then there was a 7/16 inch thicker rope that was thought to be the right for climbs where you might have a leader fall. So when we climbed the Great Arch, we took this along in my pack so that if we had to make a retreat, we would be equipped for a long rappel.
So when you would go to a crack, that is what most people had, that kind of rope right there.
I would say that in the early 70s, the switch over to the modern ropes was happening. They were, of course, much more expensive. This was the famous Royal Robbins blue suede shoes that was made by a company in France called Galibier or Richard Ponvert. And so anyway, as opposed to modern shoes, these are quite stiff. And so they were very good for edging and for jamming in cracks, but not particularly good for smearing. So you can see the sole has got a lot of wear on it, and it's basically kind of a cleated sole that would give you some traction, you know, just on mixed ground or whatever. But it's basically a very stiff, tight-fitting boot. So this would be a mountaineering boot from the 70s. This was also made by the same Galibier company in France. And this is really heavy. It has a very stiff sole. You can see the sole is screwed on. And this is the kind of boot that would go with the crampons that we were looking at.
How old are those boots right there in your hand?
These are from the probably about 1972. So anyway, these are great for climbing on big mountains out west, rock and snow. And I actually discovered that they're pretty good for rock climbing if you're doing edging, because they have a closely clipped sole and they're very stiff. So on places like Moore's Wall, sometimes I would just wear these. So you've been too diplomatic to ask me why I still have this crazy stuff hanging around. Thank you. So yeah, thinking back about my greatest moments that I remember from climbing, it's really hard to pick just a few, but I think when I think about that, it's usually a combination of two things. It's having a wonderful experience with a friend, a person who was sharing the effort and the enterprise of getting up a route or finding a mountain and getting up it. And then just great natural beauty. So among the highlights, I would think back about climbing Mount Rainier with my friend Hugh. Neither one of us had climbed it before. We had our guidebook. We knew what to look for. And but anyway, it was probably one of the most beautiful days that ever occurred on the planet Earth.
All right, so we originally met. It was at that movie night at Johnny's coffee shop, and I was showing a climbing film, and then afterwards you came up. Do you remember what you said?
No.
Roughly? But you were like, I did a little bit of climbing back in my time, and I was like, oh, okay. And then you mentioned that you had your climbing gear from the 60s and 70s.
My antique.
Yeah. And that really blew my mind. And so then you invited me over to take a look at it, and then you told me what you had. I knew that I had to bring my camera and record that. We've already shot all the
That's
footage
right.
and everything, but I'm back here today.
And it was really fun.
Yes. So here's what's crazy, John, is after I was working on this documentary thing, which is just a passion project because I'm a climber and I love climbing and I love history, and we have the same last name. And you're a friendly guy, so it's been a lot of fun. But the table's moving. But what was really interesting is there's a place now called the Carolina Climbing Museum, and I know the guy that opened it. His name's Mike Fischescher. So I reached out to Mike and I said, Mike, I really think you're gonna like this video that I'm working on for John. And I said, is there a corner of the museum where you could fit in a TV and have a looping video of this documentary? And he said, absolutely. So there's a chance that this thing we're working on, John, with you holding up your old shoes and your old rope and your old lost arrows, is going to be looping in the Carolina Climbing Museum.
So I did find one thing, a postcard for Mike Fischesser.
What?
So let's see. It's hard. Oh, it's 1973. About the same time.
Can you read it, or is it too?
It just says, John, really enjoyed meeting you Saturday, and he wanted to ask me if the trail shop had a particular kind of climbing helmet he was hunting for. Let me know if you find out anything about the helmet. Drop me a card if you'd like to go climbing sometime. And he gave me his address in Winston-Salem.
That looks absolutely deadly. It's iced all the way down.
Yeah.
So, hiking conditions are solid sheet of ice all the way down, but John is going for it. So last time you were here, that sign was probably not there.
Probably not, yeah.
Yeah? It looks sort of familiar?
Sure that there were a couple of roots here. Yeah, on this sort of tawny wall here. This would be good for winter, being the afternoon sun.
Oh, yeah. So this wall right over there?
Yeah, and kind of right up here so you can see a big crack that goes through it.
Let me see. Oh, yeah. So where are you pointing at now? Let me get your hand pointing in the thing, kind of point up there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'm pretty sure that, see that crack that goes all the way up?
Yeah.
Really, very steep, very solid rock. And maybe something in that deep crevice over there, you know, you could sort of do, you know, wedge yourself back in there.
Nice.
So far, so good.
Hey. Good. No. Hey, how's it going?
See you. I'm so surprised
Good to see you too.
It's pretty fun. And there looked to be a little fray spot in it, so I put my foot on it, and I just gave it a little tug, and it ripped apart.
Whoa!
We thought we better change from this manila and get some climbing ropes.
But you got to be young sometime, right?
I know. So we went to the Army-Navy surplus store in Winston-Salem and bought some 7/16" nylon ropes. We thought we were cool. Came back with those. Rappelled down the backside of Pilot, doing that chicken fight thing, and I looked over to my buddy. He was probably 20 feet away from me. And his carabiner didn't look right, and that stupid wrap was over on the gate. And one strand of it was about to pop through the gate, as it will do. And I said, Richard, don't move. I said, do not move. And I started running back and forth till I could get over to him. And I pinned him against the wall with my legs. And he didn't know it was his first rappel. And I fixed it for him. And I said, all right, let's go. And we went on down. We were so stupid.
When you sent me the picture with John's signature on it, where was that from exactly? It was from a meeting at Stone Mountain?
Yeah, so here's the story. You know, when the parks closed, a non-climber fell from Pilot Mountain in, I guess, the spring of '73. Could have been '72. And John Morris and Mike Rulison, all from the Raleigh area, started talking to the state parks officials and said, because they closed all state parks, which was Crowder's.
From the one fall, they closed them all.
And I'll tell you about the fall in a second, but it was Crowder's, Stone, Pilot, and Hanging Rock, I guess, were the four that had cliffs back then. They just said, no more rock climbing, that's it, it's dangerous. Well, this guy was a young man, and he had 25-foot piece of rope. And he hand over handed down it to a ledge near the staircase. And the ledge broke away. Didn't have any climbing gear or anything. He had a ball peen hammer. He was just messing around. He fell to his death, and so State Park wisely closed it because we all didn't know what it was. It was a good thing, and the whole process was awesome because our last meeting was here, where John and I were down in the field in a big.
That's a great picture.
In a big tarp tent.
It's Stone Mountain. That's awesome.
Handsome picture.
So, got all these different names. Bob Underwood apparently named all these different places in here. And where we're headed to is a place that John really used to like to go to called Razor's Edge. Right, there we go, Razor's Edge. This is John's map from the 60s and 70s, a 7.5 minute topo map. Gold Coast, there we go. So we've got, here's the Gold Coast here, and it looks like Razor's Edge right there. Oh, so you gonna drive first, or just drive? Okay. Oh, right. So I can work the camera and stuff. Guess I'll keep this stuff up front.
Yeah, we had set several target dates, and finally the weather aligned. Times that we could do it. Okay, baby.
All right. Wow. Subaru takes it.
So Charlie, if it weren't for Ecos, we'd be riding on pavement right now. The wilderness system was new. Linville Gorge was one of the first two eastern wildernesses. Linville Gorge and the Great Gulf in New Hampshire. So it's very rare to have a wilderness area in the east. And, we young environmentalists thought this was very special. And so we just thought this road goes right along the boundary of the wilderness. We just thought it was a bad idea to facilitate lots of traffic and noise and so forth.
What year was that again?
This was about 1969 and 70. Yeah, I was in graduate school at the time. And so ECOS was a student environmental organization. So I got interested in this issue of this road that would just be right by the boundary of the wilderness. And so we thought it would be a bad idea to pave this road so there would be a tremendous amount of motorized traffic to Wiseman's View. See, just, a quarter of a mile from the Linville River. So we thought it would bring lots of crowds, noise, traffic, etc., litter. So we staked out our position and we tried to get the Sierra Club to back us, and they wouldn't. So imagine if this was a paved road, it'd be a whole different experience. So we're getting close to our starting point. So here's Wiseman's View. The next trail is Conley Cove, and that's about where we'll start from.
Okay. Wow. So the road will go along. So we're gonna drop down a lot then over here, right?
I think Razor Edge Rock is below one of those high points. Maybe not the far high point, maybe a near high point.
Nice.
This is rougher than I anticipated.
Yeah, that's great. But they said the parking is on the left side of the road?
Here's a white hand turn.
Oh, there's a cairn. Right there.
Where?
You'll see it.
Oh, yeah.
I'll be darned. It still exists. Okay. Great. Shortcut, huh? Oh, hey, look at this. There's a trail. Oh, so we just took the shortcut to the Rock Jock Trail.
Maybe.
Wow.
I think where we want to go is further down. See, that's Table Rock there.
Oh, we've still got quite a ways to go then.
So now we're coming more. Now this is where we want to be.
Do you remember the first time you found this? Really? Wow.
It was in 1972, and I looked at the topo map, and it looked like this was right below a high point on the road. So I kind of navigated by landmarks. I got to the high point, and my wife drove me up. She let me out, and I just sat out by myself and walked down and found it. So.
Holy crap! Yeah! No.
Oh, shit.
That looks pretty rough. I did not think it would be that steep. Darn. I mean,
That's
it's
the
fine
last
though.
pitch,
Yeah, yeah.
because that brings you right down to the.
I mean, that looks like a. Yeah, that's
the
definitely
flat
some scrambling
spot down
stuff.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Let me go see what it looks like.
I'm definitely willing to wait for you.
Okay. Okay. I'll let you know what it looks like.
So,
Oh man.
certainly I'm glad you had that experience. Isn't this an amazing access way though down this gully?
Yeah. It's just
Amazing.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So I'm sure Bob Underwood discovered this and
Wow.
named it. And
Wow, John.
I'm feeling good.
Everything came together.
Can't beat it.
It's a perfect ending to a documentary film
So
about rock
now-
climbing.
So now if we make it back to
Yes.
civilization,
Yes.
great things will happen.
Great things will happen. All right, I'm turning the camera off.